Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have John Hamilton, author, musician, pastor, and we'll learn about his powerful journey from rock musician to pastor to writer, and we'll understand about deep insights on doubt, resilience, personal in transformation, and reinvention. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. Thank you.
You, you are welcome. Welcome to the show, John. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about faith, we'll talk about doubt, we'll talk about reinventing life, like you have done several times. We'll talk all of this. But before that, let's listen to your journey, about your background from you yourself, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Sure. And first, let me say that I am happy to visit India. It's someplace I've always wanted to visit. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. So I was born into an Irish American family that were singers and storytellers. It was a very large family. I have 55 first cousins. And so my initial orientation was much closer to the church and music. I sang in a choir. I did my first recording session when I was 12 years old with the Boston Symphony Orchestra as a vocalist, studied classical piano, and came close to going to seminary, even at that time at 14 years old. But then something extraordinary happened. I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and that changed everything for me. That completely, any thoughts I had of seminary went right out the window at that point. So as I went off to college, I studied music and philosophy, and just played music after that. I played jazz, I played rock, I played a whole bunch of different things, and was making a fairly good living at that. And then I unfortunately had something happen while I was on stage, which was an extreme panic attack, not anxiety. This was a debilitating panic attack, a code red sort of event in my body that made me unable to breathe, unable to function. And from that point on, things got gradually worse to the point where I couldn't even get back on stage again. So I had to somehow reinvent myself at that point. It took a while. These things that happen, and we'll be talking about reinvention as we go on here, I'm sure. I had to gear myself up, and I went into the world of advertising. It was someplace that I didn't have to be up on stage all the time. But it was also a creative job. I could work with creativity in being in advertising. Worked in that for about 10 years, and did fairly well in that, in the sense of moving up the ladder from baby copywriter to ultimately to a creative director, handling multinational accounts, and traveling all over the world to service those accounts, to Hong Kong, to China, to Egypt, Israel, all over the place. But that got to the point where I just felt empty inside, and the calling that I had to enter seminary at earlier in my life resurfaced. And by this time, I had moved from the Catholic Church into a Protestant denomination called the United Church of Christ. I went to seminary and got a parish immediately after leaving seminary. A great parish, a great group of people, had just a very fulfilling 12 or 15 years doing that. Then I thought I had retired at that point. But I was only retired for about a year when I got a call to go to another church. And this is yet another reincarnation of doing this. This church was a dying church, not a church that was thriving. And that also was a special way of being a pastor to people, going through a time when they weren't. This was not a happy time for these folks. It was a time of great sorrow and great displacement. And I've been doing that for probably the last 7 or 8 years in different churches out where I live right now in Western Massachusetts. And I feel like I'm on the beginning of another reinvention at this point, even at 74 years old, feeling like I'm moving on to something new. I have another book I'm working on, and a music career that has resurfaced. I have 25,000 followers on Spotify right now without even really trying too hard. It's just been an amazing ride. So.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing ride indeed. And you talk of reinvention. Uh, do you think whether we intentionally do any reinvention or still be in one career, but life is all full of dots, and that it takes into consideration all your reinventions, everything falls into one place? Do you think they are all individual journeys, or they are all a reason for putting it all together? They are all tied up in one way or the other.
Well, I'm not sure if there's a grand reason. In other words, a grand plot that we're following. But I think one of the great things that comes out of writing a memoir is that a memoir is not an autobiography. I think that anyone, I mean, an autobiography, I think, of my life would be extraordinarily boring. What you do is in writing a memoir is you craft a story, not by making stuff up. I mean, you use the raw stuff of your life, and you craft a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end for this particular memoir. So I think that when you look at those times of reinvention, as you're going through them, I don't think you really see them as times of reinvention. You see them as times of probably a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of just trying to feel your way through those periods of time. And there's I don't think there's any real script that you can hand to someone and say, here's the script for going through a reinvention. You just kind of work through it and come out the other side. I think I've been very fortunate, and I have great gratitude for the fact that something good has always come out of what appears to be a difficult time. And so I think that those periods of reinvention are necessary, and just part. Everybody is going to run into something in their lives at some point, and being able to work through that and come out the other side, I think, is an important life skill.
Absolutely, absolutely. You started with music, and now you're also composing and writing. How do you see
Yes.
these two ends and all the things in between?
Well, I think I mean, creativity is a wonderful, strange, and ultimately, I think, difficult to pin down thing. There are times when it comes and times when it doesn't come. Uh, I think the ironic part about going the word retired, and I'd like to put in a plug for retiring the word retired, because I think that what happens is you end up with for the first time in your life with free time, which is really the raw stuff of creativity. You know, that you have those long periods of time where you can can think and you can just be lost in wonder and awe, um, that you don't really have a chance if you're running around and trying to catch the train, going into work in the morning. And it's I think it's kind of funny the way that life works that way. When you first start out, you have, in your early 20s, you have no responsibility. You just do pretty much what you want to do. But that changes pretty quickly once you start to have a family and children and that type of thing. So this is, I think, I still feel at the top of my game at this point in my life, which I find surprising. It really surprises me that I would feel this creative at this point. And again, I understand that I'm very lucky, and I am very grateful for that.
Absolutely, absolutely, John. So, as they say, the more things change, the more they remain the same.
Yep.
Uh, because you started with music, and you still call that boy music is my first and still is my first religion. What who is then John Hamilton with all these reinventions? Did it change him? Did it not change him? He's still the same, very much love of music alive.
The love of music has never changed. I think that, as I wrote in my memoir here, "Honest to God," um, what what happens is, I think that these things are all part of your makeup. You go back, as I mentioned, one of the first things I said at the top of the show here was, I was born into a family of storytellers and singers. When I would go to a family gathering, somebody was either telling a funny story, and my father was a great singer. He had this wonderful baritone voice that was just, would bring the entire room to silence, just listening to him sing. So I think those seeds were planted there, very early on. So I think, to your question, do I consider myself a different person? No, I don't really consider myself a different person. I think that those seeds get nurtured over time, and they bloom at different periods in your life. If you're fortunate enough um, uh, to get to that point, to be able to have those things blossom in your life. So yeah, no, I don't think the same guy who was up on stage playing in a rock band is not all that dissimilar from the person who in a robe steps into the pulpit on a Sunday, and delivers a sermon. So I think that pretty much has stayed the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you were the same, then did you, when your life was evolving into different reinventions and everything, how did you cope with that? Did you think that this was extension of what you actually are, or this is what these are sometime, or is it, God wants you to learn certain lessons in life along the way? How did you understand God? How did you understand your faith? How did you understand about all those changes that were happening in your life?
That's a great question. I think that the my idea of God changed through those periods of time. As a young person, again, being raised in a fairly strict Irish Catholic background, I had a child's conception of God uh, that matured over time, and I'd say that as that has matured over time, my understanding of God has become much more informed by awe and wonder than by definitions. I think that I I still feel a connection to something beyond me, but I like all the things that I learned in seminary, how to define those things. I don't use those as much anymore. It's just an appreciation of the wonder of the universe. And I think what comes out of that for me very sort of naturally is just gratitude and compassion. I don't see how anyone who looks at the world, uh, or well, I guess people do look at the world and don't come to that conclusion, but that's the conclusion that I come to. That we all have a short period of time on this planet. I think um, uh, we have certain gifts that we've been given that I think that it's good if we can bring those gifts to the fore. And I think knowing that everybody else is on the same path is it leads me to be to place compassion way up there in the behaviors I think we should exhibit. Um, uh, Everyone is a fellow traveler. We're all on that same path.
Absolutely, we are all on the same path. So let that brings me to your understanding of God, your understanding of faith through your book, Honest to God. Let's understand through this book. Why do you join honesty to God? God knows us. We know God in our way. God knows everything that is happening us. Whether we are honest or not honest to God, God knows everything. He is everywhere, within us, outside us, behind us, in front of us, besides us, everywhere. Help
Right.
us understand why
I,
this title. It's a nice
okay.
title indeed.
Oh, well, obviously we do have this expression, honest to God, but throughout the book, what I've tried to do is to be scrupulously honest with what I felt, not try to sugarcoat and especially when I get to the part of losing my definitions for God when I'm still a pastor. And, so a lot of times people will come to me and say, would you pray for somebody who is sick? And I obviously I would uh, do that in solidarity with them, uh, not looking for magical outcomes. I mean, if somebody is very, very sick and you know that they are probably not going to be with us for much longer, I think prayer at that point. I like the C.S. Lewis line about prayer is that I don't pray to change God, I pray to change myself. And I think that is the honesty part of things. That uh, when you look at prayer, prayer is an attempt to align yourself with whatever your definition of God is at that point. To not necessarily looking for magical things to happen, not necessarily looking for money or success or those type of things, but more aligning yourself with what is happening in the world. And so that would be so the honesty part is that um, uh, sometimes people have different concepts of God, and I'm sure that there were people in my congregations that probably don't hold the same opinion that I have. But I did want to be honest in the sense of putting this out here. To my great relief, um, eh, many of my, in fact, I've done talks at several churches that I've served, and everyone has been so wonderful and so accepting of this approach. It hasn't. No one has come up to me and said, I never knew that you thought that. I think intuitively they probably knew what I was thinking, even if I didn't say it right out loud. So I think that honesty has served me well at this point. So that's where the honest to God comes from.
Absolutely, absolutely, John. If you can show that the book once again for the audience.
Sure. There you go. It's honest to God. This is available on Amazon. Uh, uh, so if you are looking for it begins actually with a scene where I have a gun in my back, believe it or not, when I'm playing in a rock and roll band. And get involved in a situation that gets a little out of control, and but ends with a very peaceful and contemplative seen where a church that I'm serving, which is about to go out of business, we have just a beautiful service, and it's we end on a peaceful, almost a silent night. It's a Christmas time story. So that's that. Goes from dive bars playing in rock and roll bands to traveling the world playing in a band to working in advertising and again traveling the world, and now in a small little world, still serving people. I hope serving people.
Of course, you are. So, in your book, who is this book for? Honest to God.
Again, another great question. I think it's for the reactions that I've been getting are obviously some pastors would gravitate to this. Pastors always love the inside stuff about what goes on in the congregation. How you deal with the congregations. I've been very fortunate in that the congregations that I have served have been very, very good people. That isn't always the case. Sometimes a pastor runs into a congregation that just doesn't take, and there can be all kinds of problems. I think ultimately, this book is for people who are going to be lifelong seekers, people who won't take yes for an answer. That to know that we continue to search until that we never ultimately find what we're looking for. It's the search that is important, and being faithful to that search along the way. There's a point where I think I mentioned in the book where arriving at the church that I arrived at, which I thought was my end point, was just a clearing in the path, and that the path continued beyond that, which came as a big surprise to me. But nevertheless, I think is true that we will continue to search. What as T.S. Eliot says, we continue to search until we find the place where we started and know it again for the first time. I think that is the nature of humankind's searching.
Absolutely, absolutely, John. So, while you were in this whole journey of life to understand things, you talk about faith, you talk about Christianity, you talk about that, faith is just like now that it's changing. I don't want to use the word collapse or anything, but I want to understand what makes you think so. And you also talk about your spiritual journey. How did it happen? Did it happen with God, without God? It was a different direction altogether. Help us understand that, how you
Boy,
have
those
discussed it in the book.
those are great questions. So just I'll speak a little bit about where Christianity is at right now. And I can't speak for the entire world. I just can speak to my little corner of the world. Churches are dying where I live. Christian churches. The tide of secularism, which probably started in Europe, has really seeped over into certainly the eastern part of the United States, and at the same time, there's a very strong evangelical, and some would even call it Christian nationalism movement going on in the country. So Christianity to me, is very much in flux right now. There's a sense of there's not. It reminds me very much of the Reformation, when there is, I think we're at one of those 500-year periods where things are really changing very, very quickly. And if you're right in the middle of that, it's difficult to see it. But if you step back and look at it, you can see that many things are going away and many things are being born right now. So there is, I think that's why I try to tie the Christianity and its changes in with the collapse of many institutions. That we're living in a world where many institutions are collapsing right now, an extreme period of change throughout the world everywhere. So I think that's I think it's a question of when you were born. what period of time you were born into, which is totally an accident. And you could be born into a time where not a whole lot happens. That is very unusual. I think that almost everybody is born into a time where something is going on. But this, I think, happens to be a particularly turbulent period of time where things are changing very, very quickly. And I think that leads to why creativity and art is so important. I think that the way we tell our stories is so important to us and for those around us as we go through these periods of time. It's making sense. Stories help us make sense.
Absolutely, they certainly make a lot of sense, John. So I want to understand. See, when we humans, when we make changes in our life, we can call it reinvention. Why do you call them that? Its time is difficult. Why can we think that it is also reinventing itself? That the story is told by those people who had their own ways of telling the story, that is not working anymore. Now new form of storytelling has to happen, and the word of God, the word of wisdom, the word of enlightenment, everything will come down in the right earnest with a little bit of tweak, a little bit of reinvention. It's not God's fault. It is human beings' fault for not being able to tell his story properly.
I think it's incumbent again, another great question. I think it's incumbent upon every generation to assess their view of how what their definition of God is working in the world. It's going to be different for every period of time. You look back at the Hebrew Bible and the period of time that the Jews were wandering in the desert, and they had going through the Exodus and that type of thing. The reason that story is so powerful is that we still go through those periods of time. We end up, and that's why they resonate so strongly with us, because it's not, yes, they went through that period of time, but we also we could be going through an Exodus period of time in our own lives, being lost in the desert. There's a picture on the cover of the book about being lost in the wilderness. To me, that's a period of time that we're sort of in a wilderness period right now, that things are shifting and changing. So we draw from that story. That's we go back to the Hebrew Bible, look at the Exodus story, and you take that and move that into the 21st century, and it has resonance. Humans are always trying to figure this out in one way or another. And I think when we happen upon those deep stories that resonate in all of us, that we can all feel in our hearts, we know that we're on to something. That we're not the first people to go through this. We have wisdom traditions to draw off of, that people have. All of a sudden you realize, this person has been here, this writer has been here, this sage has been here before, and they're talking to me right now. I understand what they're saying.
Absolutely. So, how has God guided you? How have the spirits guided you? In your journey, which you call your spiritual journey, and when you talk also of transcendence, and also the loss of connection to the transcendent, and which led to walk into wilderness to search for it again. Help us understand these different things that you talk about. What is it that you want to tell the readers about it?
Okay, that again, wonderful questions. The transcendence, and I'll just give a quick definition of that. Transcendence to me is those moments when we are when our ego drops away and we feel connected to something beyond us that we know. And I don't put as many definitions on that as much before. I don't necessarily describe it as the Trinity or any, using Christian terminology. It's sort of a wordless feeling for me. It's a feeling that I get or got and well, still get in playing music when my ego just drops away and I go off and I can disappear for a half an hour, 45 minutes, and as I'm writing or composing or doing something, and come out of that and think, where have I been, for the last 45 minutes? And I think that where I've been is connected to the transcendent. I've tapped into something that is beyond me. That egoless state shows up in all religions. That's what people strive for. That egoless, that's what the saints strive for. That egoless state. So I think that uh, I feel fortunate. I just drop into that sometimes, just without even trying. There are other times when I've had to work at it and meditate and do all kinds of reading and stuff to get to that point. But other times I can just be absorbed, and I think again it's sort of a wordless state for me. It's that state of knowing that you are comforted and knowing that you are absorbed into the flow of life and whatever definition you want. That's why the definitions of God at this point start to fall away from me. It's more that my ego falls away and I'm connected. That is the important thing for me.
Absolutely. So, what is the purpose of this book, Honest with God?
I'm,
John?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Yeah. So, what is the purpose of this book that you want to accomplish through Honest to God?
Right. So I think that the purpose I think when anyone who writes first is trying to figure out what they think. And so that was my first purpose, and that changed over the course of it took me a long time to write this. So, I digging in and just trying to figure out what you want to say. I want to, if in some of I've been fortunate again that some people have actually come up and said to me that the exact reason why I wrote this book was that I can find myself in here. That if I can write something and somebody finds as they're reading it that they can put themselves in that scene and say to themselves, I've been there. Now I know that he's been there. Here's how he acted in that situation. And here's how I acted in that situation. Maybe it's very similar. Maybe it's not very similar, but the searching part, I think, will connect with almost anybody who will find themselves at some point in some of the situations that I found myself in, in either hope or despair or anxiety or happiness throughout the entire range of human emotion.
Absolutely, John. So, what is it that you search for now, John? What is it that you seek for yourself?
That's another great question. What I seek for myself is a more. I'm trying to be as peaceful as I possibly can in a turbulent world. I think that I feel fortunate that I'm still able to create and write and make music, and I do want to share that with folks in an attempt to be in solidarity with them. That art is the great bridge between us. It's the way that we communicate. Even though I played rock and roll as a young guy in jazz, I'm doing a lot of very, very soft and mellow piano pieces right now, because I think that the world needs some softness and some mellowness out there to kind of soothe us as we go through these turbulent periods of time. So the creativity will lead you where you need to go. I think that's the kind of lesson that I've learned at this point, that if you follow your instinct, you will end up going where you need to go.
Absolutely. Creativity will lead you to where you want to go. Follow your instincts where you want to go. Music
Yeah.
will lead you to where you
Yes.
want to go. If I understand, music is the language of God. It's the language of universe. And as you said, you moved from rock and roll, now you play softer music, but you see, God creates music in everything that he does, from the rivers to the
Yes.
oceans. Rivers have different music, oceans have different music. You know,
Absolutely.
a waterfall has different music, rainfall has different music. The
That's
universe has different music for different things.
absolutely. I could not agree with you more. Absolutely. Yeah. That's great.
Absolutely. And yet you are going very strong still, as you said, at this age, 74, if I heard correctly, you are
That's
still
it.
very strong, and so many things to look forward to. Let's talk about your other book, which is going to come out next year, The Weight of Snow. This named of Snow.
The weight of snow. Yeah, it's funny because I complain a lot about the coldness where I live, but I didn't complain as much when I was a younger man, and loved being outside in the snow and skiing and that type of thing. This is a story, going to be a story of about memory and loss, but also again connection. It's going to take place. It's about a writer who goes up to a cabin to finish up a book that he has to produce for his publisher. He's got a dog with him, and the dog isn't real, although he doesn't know that the dog is not real. He's starting to lose his mind a little bit, and through this, the conversations he has with the dog, which he thinks is still there, his dog, he goes over these events in his life and starts to reinterpret them and put them into a story. Some of the pain he's had, some of the good times that he's had. Again, someone once said, I think, that we all have only one book in us. We just keep writing the same thing over and over again in different formats. So this is not that far from Honest to God. It's just more a fictional account of creating that through line. What is that through line that goes through our lives? So there's a great the poet William Stafford has a great poem called "The Way It Is," and he has a line in there that has been sort of a mantra for me. About the fact that in our lives there's a thread that goes through it, and we have to hang on to that thread. So we all have a thread, and if we hang on to that thread, everything will be okay. If we lose that thread, we're in trouble. But if we hang on to that thread, we will be okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Lots of wisdom from you, John, in this discussion of ours, and there is so much to look forward to. I'm sure a lot of people would want to know more about you, about the work you are doing, connect with you, learn more about your book, about your next book. What is the best way for them to do so, John?
Well, they can look to my website, which is called therealjohnhamilton.com, or they can just go to Amazon and pick up Honest to God on Amazon. Should be available there. And I would like to thank you for such wonderful questions. It's very early in the morning where I am right now, but the questions you asked, I hope I didn't talk too much, but the questions you asked were so good that it woke me up.
Make humanity wake up and understand God in its right manner, and perhaps, as we said, moving away from woke to actually awaken ourselves everywhere. That is, I guess,
But
and all I can say is, John, it's a pleasure talking to you. The pleasure is all mine.
oh no,
Thank you
no,
so much.
the pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Okay, AJ, take care of yourself. Yeah,
You too. You too. With
yeah.
so many words of wisdom acquired by talking to John, and so much things to still get to learn from him. It's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Okay, thank you.